I wanted to do this video because I talked about it in my stories a few days ago. And it's this idea that came to me that was like, if somebody is trying to control you, it's because they themselves are being controlled. And I know that might sound counterintuitive. So let's just unpack that a little bit. The example that I used in my stories was Christmas, right? We plan out Christmas, we plan who's going to be there, what food's going to happen, what gifts are going to be exchanged, all these things, right? And we do that because we want to have a good time, right? We want to experience the maximum amount of pleasure or happiness in that day with those people at that time, right? We wouldn't have planned that if we didn't weren't going to get that payoff, right? And so what happens is we take that Christmas, like, by the way, it could be Christmas, it could be the way that you create, it could be your weekend going the way that you planned, it could be getting all green lights on the way to work. There's so many different things. Christmas is just a representative, right? So Christmas is like an event, something needs to happen at a certain way on a certain time. We can try to control that because we have attached our happiness on some level to that thing happening. We've convinced ourselves, okay, if this happens, then this is how I experience the most amount of happiness. And now, if something gets in the way of that, like maybe a pandemic or weather or somebody gets sick, and Christmas doesn't happen that way, or we don't get what we want, or somebody couldn't find turkey at the grocery store, like those kinds of things will make us, sometimes will throw us into a reactionary state where we think, okay, well, because I don't have the turkey, now I cannot experience the maximum amount of happiness. And that is why we try to control things, right? But when you're trying to control something, you are caught in one way of thinking. When you think that the only way to happiness, the only way to experience this maximum amount of pleasure is through getting this or having this thing go this way at this time, you are caught in an ego story because it's one way, right? One way of thinking. And when you're caught in an ego story, you're not the one in control anymore. It's your programming. It's what you learned when you were a child. It was what somebody told you. It was all sorts of things that you picked up from your environment. It didn't have anything to do with what you created, what you actually represent, and what you stand for, right? So that was a very long introduction, but here is the video of what I am talking about. So, to understand what happens kind of behind the scenes when you're trying to control something, let's just look at this, right? So, this is you, and this car. I know I'm a very talented artist, but this car represents whatever you think will bring you happiness on some level, right? It could be the way that you spend your free time. It could be what you have planned for Christmas, what you maybe the way that your family is around you, whether they're clean or whether they do something in a certain way, right? You have attached yourself to the idea that this thing is going to bring you happiness on some level, right? And so without that thing, then we convince ourselves, oh, well, I won't be happy or I won't achieve the maximum amount of happiness. And so what we do is we attach ourselves to that thing happening. And that's what leads to control. That's why we try to control things. But we have to realize that when we are caught in one way of thinking, we are trapped in an ego story. And that ego story is going to come from our programming and what we have, internalized as kids. And that's not authentic. That's not the true us. That's the way that we learned it when we were growing up, right? And so what we need to realize is that real freedom is knowing that we have options, knowing that we can get the same level of happiness by so many different things. Yeah, it could be having nice things or, the proverbial car and the nice house. Like, that's true. But then they also come from things like connection, meaning, purpose, all of those things. And really, it would be more accurate to depict real freedom like this, right? It doesn't come from outside of you. It's a knowing that you can get happiness from any situation. And so, you guys, I talk a lot about ego stories, right? And that is because when you are caught in an ego story, you are being controlled by your programming and you are blocking yourself from your authenticity. You're blocking yourself from your spirit. You're blocking yourself from evolving into the person that you're meant to be, from fulfilling your soul purpose on this planet, right? We all have a soul purpose. We all have, the thing that we're supposed to be doing, that, and that thing is going to give us more pleasure than any nice house or car or, Christmas going our way, that anybody can experience. But when we are caught in an ego story, we block ourselves from that thing, right? We block ourselves from knowing our authentic self. And so that's why I focus so much on ego stories. And I wanted to give this to you because when you can find out, when you can realize, when you can wake up to the fact that you are trying to control something, then all of a sudden you it's like you realize that you've been in prison, right? I don't know if you saw that too, but you can't escape from prison if you don't know you're in prison, right? And so when you wake up and you realize, okay, now I'm caught in an ego story, now you can start to take a step back and ask yourself if there's a creative solution or if there's another way you can look at it, and you stop being controlled by your own programming. And I have so many things to say about this, and I could go on and on and on, but maybe I'll just stop there. I hope that's helpful. I hope that you can see that, like, if you are trying to control something, just take a step back. And if somebody's trying to control you, don't let that throw you into your own ego story. And I know that's easier said than done, but don't let that, because what happens is, like, sometimes somebody tries to control you and it triggers your own ego story, right? Just let that be. Like, you can use that and have some compassion for them, right? If somebody's trying to control you. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. And if I don't talk to you before Christmas, I hope you also have a nice Christmas.